This is not a message for everyone. This is a transmission for the starseeds, for those of you who know or suspect that you are something different, something unusual, not of this place. These are the messages for you that I, as the host of the MaxAnte, are bringing to you. Don't expect anything here to make a lot of sense. Everything is entirely paradoxical and is for you to interpret and for you to discern what is true. Arrival. The arrival here in this world is a very peculiar story, for sure. As I'm sure it is for everybody arriving here. It is such a strange place to be, really, when you think about it. And so, like everybody, obviously, I was born in this world and grew up here as a small child and surrounded by people who were kind and good, but really had no idea about what was going on. But the strangest part, of course, is the actual arrival itself, which in my case was filled with so much mystery. It's mysterious anyway, where we're coming from. But I didn't have a father at first. So that made things very peculiar for me. Even stranger as I grew and learned the story of what apparently happened, where my mother, a teenager, she was only 19, and she briefly met this most peculiar Danish artist. Can you imagine? It was the end of the 60s and early 70s, drug-crazed hippiedom, and people were getting up to all sorts of adventures. Everything was so new for them. I can only imagine how they'd grown up in stiff, orderly ways of being from the 50s. So much tightness. And here they were being liberated into the 60s and early 70s. So it was that environment that my mother briefly met this highly unusual character. And they had a wild little fling for probably less than 2 weeks. The strangest part, which was unbelievable, was that they never even had sex. And so it was that my mother didn't even realize that she was pregnant until about 5 months into her term. She must have been so disconnected from her body, which would become very apparent later on in life. And so there was no alternative. And I doubt that she even would have gone ahead with any other alternatives. But my arrival was so secretive. I'd somehow ensured that I was coming through no matter what. Nobody even knew. I was tucked away in there. And so I came into the world, and she was a very kind woman for this very small infant. And later on, within a couple of years, she would indeed meet a very good man who would become my father, and I grew up with, and then they would have some more kids and so forth. And so they created this happy little family, with 2 more daughters and me. It wasn't 2.5 kids, it was 3 kids. But there we were, being grown up in what was to be the machine of society. They, of course, didn't know any of that. My parents became hardened atheists, very, very sure of themselves about that there was nothing mysterious or magical about this world. They'd been socialists, and even my father came from communist background. And so the world for them was entirely materialistic, in the sense that all that there was the material world. And yet, as a small little boy, I was so in touch with the magic. I could feel it. I grew up in this beautiful part of Australia. Beautiful at the time, because everything there has changed now. It is nothing like it was. Back then, there was still some magic left. A little. And I was feeling it, running through the woods and through the Australian bush, having all sorts of adventures. It was a very fortunate time to be alive. So different from the world of today. A world where the machines had not at all taken over. Time rolled slowly by. It was at least maybe 20 times slower than it is today. And I'm sure for you, if you grew up in that time or even before, you can remember how much space and time everybody had. There was no rush. There was really nowhere to get. It was a very different kind of world. And if you've grown up since the mid-90s, which is when everything changed, that is when we had the arrival of the internet and the cell phones. And from then on, people got more and more plugged in to the machine, into the matrix. It had already been at work for a long, long time. But back then, in the 70s, when I was a little boy, it was a different world. I didn't see any of that coming. Of course, I was super excited about space and science and technology and what was going to be happening. It was like we were all waiting with bated breath for what was to come. A magical, well, not a magical world. It would seem like a magical world because the machines were going to build everything that we dreamed of. More and more gadgets were going to come and make everybody's lives so much easier. That's what they said. That we'd have a lot more space and leisure in our lives with the more gadgets that we had. That was the promise to the 1950s housewives. Get every gadget that you can and fill your house with all these machines and make a little nuclear family. Make everything. But why? What was it for? Before I can really remember, there was just nature. There was just me playing in with the trees. That sense of me, of mine, was slowly forming. It's an unavoidable trap that society pushes us into. Step by step, each year, we come closer and closer to the full entwinement with an intoxication, to a personality that believes it's true, that it's entitled, that it is here to be and to have. And so I grew up wanting more and more. And with the wanting, with the desire, with this thirst, with this craving, came fear. So fear slowly seeps more and more into the mind of this little person growing up. Why so much fear? Because as you yearn for and collect things, there is the concern of loss. There is, oh my God, I so much want this. And because I want it, what if I don't get it? What if once I get it, what if I lose it? These are all the concerns that creep in to building a life filled with desires. And that's what I was grown up into. Along with, of course, the sense of competitiveness that I had to get ahead no matter what happened to anybody else. I didn't realize that the whole system was built to produce people of wanting. We were all being designed for this mega system. It didn't even take that much. Once this system was up and running, everybody just naturally fell into it. We all thought that that was all that there was, that it was completely normal and natural to be like this, that there wasn't even any alternative, because of course you believed who you were, and you believed in your desires. In fact, you believed that they were your desires. It wasn't even something that you considered that, hang on, why do I even want this stuff? Did I even come up with this? Everything was planted around us. Our minds were fertile gardens to grow so many desires, so many wantings. But deep within all of that was a confusion that was most certainly clear by the time I was a teenager. Confusion around what was I really going to do with all of this? And at the heart of that confusion, mixed with fear, was the doubt, this self-doubt of, well, I know I so much want it, but am I going to get it? How can I guarantee? The world has promised me, like as my birthright, that I will have all of this, but I don't know if I really can. And I saw with all the people around me that they were actually even more riddled with doubts than I was. In fact, they didn't even look like they were going to get anywhere. I was certain that I was going to bring about everything that I wanted. But I was confused about the way it was going to happen. I didn't know. And so I desperately wanted some security, some surety. And that's the other thing that goes hand in hand with all of this, is this desire for security. We not only want everything, but we want a guarantee that we're going to get it and that we're going to keep it. Well, what nobody tells us is that there aren't any guarantees at all, and beyond that, that there is no security. And even beyond all of that, that every single thing that I would accomplish in my life and gather and win would all be lost. This is entirely a losing game. Every single thing that is hard won in this world of the human society is always lost. That would take me so many decades to fully understand, as I watched my mother, the person who'd given me life, very, very slowly decay. It was her illness throughout my childhood and the rest of my life that was perhaps going to become life's greatest teacher. Slowly watching her die from a brain tumor that would eventually turn her into someone without much life. But this must have taught me something that I can't even remember learning as a child about the deep uncertainty of life. That if this woman who I had counted on could wither away in front of me over decades, then what did this really mean for me? And so I watched her throughout life becoming more and more diminished. She started off such a fiery woman, full of zest and oomph. She wanted the best for us, even though she hardly spent any time with us. I don't have a single memory of playing with my mother. She was in another world, like a world of fairies, always painting pictures. But she did have some good ideas. She sent me to a Steiner school. She was adamant, at least in something that was accurate, that the schooling system, the default schooling system that programs everybody to think a certain way, that it was not going to be the best. And so, fortunately, I didn't grow up inside the mega matrix, just on the periphery. And my parents being socialist hippies, that probably helped a little as well. They never gave us a single piece of advice. It was the most strange thing growing up in like a vacuum. No input at all about what life was going to be. No concepts at all about what to do with one's life. Just these peculiar ideas around a just world and Steiner education, hippie lentil soup, and so forth. I'm grateful for all of that, because it would eventually push me to start questioning why, and if there is no God, what is really going on here? These questions, they began to bother me. And so it was that eventually I would find a pathway to confront these and investigate, to begin the process of pulling back the veil. And that was what led me to my first encounters with meditation in Sydney in the early 90s. And from there, I would gain at least the first tools, which is something that I highly recommend that people have. Because without a foundation of meditation, how are you going to navigate this very strange world? If you don't have a place to rest your mind and a process that can bring some peace to a world that is becoming busier and crazier, then you will be adrift and lost. Placing some time at the beginning and end of every day became my central bedrock. It was what guided me through all of the decades. And yes, it also created the biggest barrier and brought me the most pain in my life. But that will be for the next episode.